Australian waterbirds are quite iconic to a lot of people, whether those people are in the city or the country. And they're really quite an interesting bunch. So it's quite disappointing to hear that some of their populations are in decline. Unlike birds in other parts of the world, many Australian waterbirds are thought to be nomadic, which means that they move around a lot in search of food and breeding sites, rather than staying in one place their whole lives or migrating north-south every year. Some of our waterbirds breed in spectacular colonies, and usually this is only at very special particular wetlands, and usually only when water and weather conditions are just right. Some of these species include our 3 different kinds of ibis that we have in Australia, the stunning royal spoonbill and the yellow-billed spoonbill, just as examples. But one thing that all waterbirds have in common is they all need water. So whether that's for feeding or for breeding or for both, waterbirds need water. While the use of valuable environmental water within Australia's Murray-Darling Basin has often been focused on supporting completion of waterbird breeding events, particularly at those special wetlands, land and water managers are actually becoming increasingly conscious of the need to also manage waterbird feeding sites and stopover sites for when they're travelling, and roosting sites and refuge sites. There's a lot of different habitats that waterbirds use. Those sites and their availability and their quality and what condition they're in are likely to affect bird survival. And this is particularly the case for young, inexperienced birds. So while we might have a big breeding event that appears to be successful because lots of young birds fledged and left the colony, we don't actually know what happens to those young birds when they leave. Do they survive? Do they become adults? Where do they go to eat? Where do they go to take shelter? Are there any other important places that we should be aware of if we want to be stopping population declines of our waterbirds? We need to know more about where our waterbirds go and what they eat and what their other needs are, because that'll help us to improve our efficiency of environmental water management in the Murray-Darling Basin. Basically, this will come down to where to put water and when, and that will help us to better sustain the habitats that waterbirds need. So with my colleagues in other institutions as well as within CSIRO, we have set about, and we're still doing, a very comprehensive project that is looking at the movements and the survival rates of straw-necked ibis, of royal spoonbills and of Australian white ibis. We're using both standard methods that have been used for a long time, but also the latest in modern technology. This includes nest monitoring via on-ground surveys, drone surveys, remote sensing cameras on nests, plus we're doing an amazing study GPS tracking bird movements. All of these methods are safe for the birds, but they give us incredibly detailed and accurate information that has enabled us to know exactly when and where the birds are flying, when and where they're eating and breeding, and the details of the impacts of various predators and other management issues like water level changes. And all of this is in detail that we've never had before. While the project is still in progress and we're still analysing the data, we're getting some quite amazing results at very broad scales at the whole of Murray-Darling Basin to Eastern Australia scale, including, for example, the use of common routes by different birds at different times. The details of those routes and how fast the birds travelled them were all unknown until now. We've had birds flying hundreds of kilometres in a day. We've had birds flying over 3,500 kilometres up and down the Murray-Darling Basin within a year. And the research has also shown us the places or the habitats that are commonly used for feeding and shelter by young birds. Just after they leave the breeding area, where are those young, inexperienced birds going to get their food and take shelter? But ultimately, what our waterbirds need is water at the right places and at the right times. And so our research will continue to analyse data that will provide information to land and water managers to help them to make the decisions that they need to make. So to use an old cliche, watch this space.